Jacob's story begins long before he takes his first steps. In fact, it all begins inside the womb of his mother, Rebekah. She was the wife of Isaac, Abraham's son, and for many years she was unable to conceive. Imagine the pain and frustration of a woman who longed for a child, but time passed and nothing happened. But Isaac prayed to the Lord, and God, in his faithfulness, heard his prayer. Rebekah finally became pregnant. However, this pregnancy was unlike any other. From the womb, something strange was happening. The Bible says the children were already struggling within her. Imagine the feeling. Rebekah felt kicks, pushes, and an unusual agitation. It wasn't a peaceful pregnancy. It was as if a battle was being waged before the children were even born. Confused and distressed, she sought God in prayer, wanting to understand what was happening in her body. And the Lord revealed something profound and prophetic to her. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples from your body will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Genesis 25:23. These words were not just an explanation. They were a prophecy that would mark the entire history of Jacob and Esau, the 2 sons who were about to be born. And when the time came for the birth, the scene was impressive. First, Esau was born. The Bible describes him as red-haired, covered in hair, as if wearing a fur cloak. He was strong, robust, and drew attention with his unique appearance. But right behind him came Jacob. And here's the striking detail. Jacob was born firmly holding his brother's heel. It was as if, from the very first moment of his life, he refused to be left behind. This image, little Jacob clinging to Esau's heel, already revealed something about his character, his determination, and even the conflicts that were yet to come. Because of this, he was given the name Jacob, which carries the meaning of he who holds the heel, or he who grasps. The birth of these 2 brothers was not only the beginning of 2 lives, but the beginning of a story marked by rivalry, divine promises, and profound transformations. Don't miss any epic story from the Bible. Sign up now. Different personality from brothers. Years passed, and the 2 brothers grew up. From an early age, the differences between them became very clear. Esau, the eldest, was a strong-looking man, hairy and full of energy. He loved the outdoors, running through the fields and becoming increasingly skilled as a hunter. He was fearless, spending days in the woods, knowing how to handle wild animals and bringing home fresh game to feed the whole family. Jacob, on the other hand, was very different. While Esau found pleasure in adventure and physical strength, Jacob was calm, reflective, and preferred the quiet life of tents. He enjoyed staying home, helping with tasks closer to home. He was not a man of the field, but someone who observed, planned, and knew how to think ahead. And as happens in many families, the parents' preferences were divided. Isaac, the father, loved Esau, and there was a clear reason. Esau brought the game that Isaac so prized. It was as if each animal Esau hunted was a gift that further strengthened the bond between father and son. Rebekah, on the other hand, had a special bond with Jacob. Perhaps because of his quiet demeanor, perhaps because she spent more time with him, but there was a strong bond between them, a bond of complicity. Rebekah saw something in Jacob that others didn't, and her mother's heart was more inclined toward him. This difference in personality and their parents' preferences created a striking contrast between the brothers. Esau, the hunter, was vigorous and impulsive. Jacob, the quiet, cunning man, and close to his mother. The stage was being set for the great conflicts and upheavals that would mark their lives. The sale of birthright. Over time, the difference between Jacob and Esau was not only one of personality, but also of destiny. Esau, as the firstborn, had a special right, primogeniture. This meant that when his father died, he would inherit most of the family's wealth, and even more importantly, carry on the spiritual blessing that had come down to Abraham. It was a sacred right, an inheritance that surpassed earthly riches. But Esau didn't value this privilege as he should have. For him, life was now, hunting, eating, living in the moment. The future seemed too distant. One day, Esau returned from the field exhausted. The scorching sun, the difficult hunt, and hunger had left him nearly exhausted. Arriving home, he smelled the irresistible aroma of a stew Jacob had prepared. It was a hot, steaming lentil stew, the kind of food that seems to revive even the most weary body. Esau approached and asked, "Let me eat this red stew. I'm starving." Jacob, always alert and shrewd, saw an opportunity in his brother's weakness. In a firm voice he replied, "I will give you the stew, but first sell me your birthright." The proposal seemed absurd. How could anyone exchange something so large for a mere plate of food? But Esau, overcome with hunger and exhaustion, said, "I'm starving. What good will the birthright be to me now?" And so, with an oath, Esau gave his birthright to Jacob. He received the bowl of lentils and the bread, ate his fill, and then got up and left as if nothing had happened. The Bible makes a point of emphasizing that Esau despised his birthright. It was at that moment that Jacob, with his cunning, took the first step toward fulfilling the prophecy God had revealed to Rebekah. The older shall serve the younger. But that choice would have enormous consequences, and the conflict between the brothers was only just beginning. Do you want to discover the secrets of the stories that changed the world? Click subscribe. The deception of receiving Isaac's blessing time passed, and Isaac was already old. His sight had weakened to the point where he could barely see. Sensing his days were coming to an end, he called to Esau, his firstborn son, and said, "My son, prepare yourself. Take your weapons, go to the field, hunt something for me, and prepare a tasty meal, just as I like it. Then bring it to me for me to eat, and then I will give you my blessing before I die." A father's blessing in those days wasn't just pretty words. It was something spiritual, prophetic, capable of changing the destiny of an entire life. And Isaac had in mind to give this blessing to Esau. But Rebekah, who was listening to the conversation, couldn't accept it. She remembered the prophecy God had given her while she was still pregnant. The elder will serve the younger. Convinced that Jacob should receive the blessing, she quickly devised a plan. He called Jacob quickly and explained what he had heard. Then he said, "Go to the flock, bring 2 young goats, and I will prepare a tasty meal for your father, just the way he likes it. You will take the meal to him and receive the blessing in your brother's place." Jacob hesitated, not because he doubted the idea, but because he feared discovery. "But my brother is hairy, and I'm not. If my father touches me, he'll notice and curse me instead of blessing me." Rebekah, determined, replied, "May this curse fall upon me, my son. Just do as I say." And so she took Esau's clothes and dressed Jacob. To further deceive Isaac, she covered Jacob's hands and neck with goat skins so that he would look like his brother. With food in his hands and his heart racing, Jacob entered his father's tent. "My father," he said. "Who are you, my son?" Isaac asked suspiciously. Jacob replied, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Get up, eat some game, and give me your blessing." Isaac was surprised. How could his son have hunted so quickly? But Jacob held firm to his lie. Still, Isaac wanted to confirm it. He asked Jacob to come closer. Touching him, he felt the fake fur and said the famous phrase, "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's." Even though he was suspicious, he ate the food, drank the wine, and finally gave Jacob his blessing. He laid his hands on him and spoke words that would change his life forever. That he would be blessed with abundance, that he would be lord over his brothers, and that the people would serve him. Shortly after Jacob left, Esau arrived from the field with the game. He prepared the meal and happily entered his father's tent. "Father, get up and eat of my game to bless me." But when Isaac heard this, he trembled violently. He realized he had been deceived and that the blessing had already been given. Esau cried out bitterly, "My father, bless me too." But it was too late. Jacob had received the blessing, and nothing could be done to undo it. Esau wept and swore that one day he would take revenge on his brother. This episode forever marked the relationship between the two brothers. Jacob obtained the blessing, but now he would have to deal with Esau's wrath and the consequences of his choice. Every story has a powerful lesson. Join us and sign up. Jacob's flight to Laban's house. After receiving Isaac's blessing, Jacob thought he had conquered everything, but his joy was short-lived. Esau, upon discovering his deception, became furious. His eyes burned with rage, and he swore, "Jacob deceived me and took my blessing. One day when my father dies, I will avenge him." Jacob was terrified. He knew his brother was strong, courageous, and capable of carrying out his threats. What would be safe? What would be prudent? He needed to leave immediately before Esau acted. Rebekah, realizing the gravity of the situation, made a quick decision. She called Jacob and said, "My son, don't stay here. Flee to my brother Laban's house in Haran. Stay there until Esau's fury subsides." Jacob listened to his mother and prepared to leave. At dawn, before the sun illuminated the valley and aroused Esau's jealousy, he gathered what he could carry, his clothes and a few belongings, and set off silently. The tension was immense. Each step was a mixture of fear and hope. He didn't know what awaited him, but he trusted in God's protection. The journey was not short. He would have to cross valleys, mountains, and deserts, facing scorching sun and cold nights. All this while the danger of being overtaken by Esau loomed over him like a constant shadow. During the journey, Jacob felt the weight of fear and responsibility. He remembered his mother's words and the prophecy he had heard, that he would be the continuation of God's promise, that God was with him. This quiet faith became his strength, even when anxiety threatened to overwhelm him. Finally, after days of walking, Jacob reached the region where Laban, his uncle, lived. He was far from his parents' home, but still under God's protection. Little did he know that there his life would take unexpected turns, that he would encounter great challenges and also blessings that would shape his destiny, stories that inspire, teach, and transform. Subscribe to the channel now. The Dream of the Stairway to Heaven at Bethel. After days of walking, Jacob finally reached a quiet place to rest. Night had fallen, and the exhaustion of his long journey weighed heavily on him. With only a few stones under his head, he lay down to sleep in the open air. Little did he know that that night would mark his life forever. While sleeping, he had an extraordinary dream. He saw a ladder or ramp extending from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. The vision was magnificent, luminous, and full of movement. Jacob was filled with wonder, feeling both fear and awe. And at the top of the ladder stood God. He spoke directly to Jacob, confirming something that would change his entire destiny. "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants after you. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through them. I will be with you wherever you go, and I will never leave you." Jacob awoke in awe and excitement. He looked around and realized he was in a sacred place. Reverently, he took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it upright as a landmark. He poured oil on it, declaring, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." Then he made a vow, "If God will be with me, protect me, provide me with food and safe transportation on this journey, then the Lord will be my God, and this place will be God's house." This dream wasn't just a pretty vision. It was a divine promise, a confirmation that even while fleeing and facing great dangers, Jacob was in God's hands. It was a reminder that he didn't walk alone, that his life, like Abraham's, would be part of a greater and eternal plan. The Bethel ladder became a symbol of God's presence, and Jacob, now full of faith and hope, continued on his journey carrying that promise in his heart. Something extraordinary is coming. Sign up before you miss out. The encounter with Raquel at the well. After days of traveling, Jacob finally reached the land of Haran, where his uncle Laban lived. The journey had been long and exhausting, but his faith and hope remained steadfast. As he approached a well, he saw a group of women arriving with their flocks. Among them was Rachel, Laban's youngest daughter. When Jacob saw Rachel, something deep inside him stirred. It wasn't just admiration for her beauty, it was as if he recognized in her a part of God's plan for his life. He ran toward her, running like someone who has finally found what his heart has been searching for. Jacob, overcome with emotion, helped Rachel draw water for the flocks, showing kindness and strength at the same time. The moment was intense and charged with emotion. He couldn't hold back his tears of joy and relief. Finally, he was safe and had found someone who deeply touched his heart. Raquel also noticed something special about this man. He wasn't just a stranger arriving from far away. There was a kindness and sincerity that stood out. She smiled, and in that instant, a silent bond began to form. Jacob stood there beside the well, knowing that God had placed Rachel in his path for a reason. The passion was immediate, but there was also respect, admiration, and gratitude. He had escaped danger, received God's promise at Bethel, and now felt his life beginning to transform in extraordinary ways. That encounter at the well wasn't just a romantic moment, it was a turning point in Jacob's life, a chapter that showed that even after hardships and struggles, God always fulfills his promises and prepares the right path for those who trust in him. Secrets of the Bible that few know. Click to subscribe. Rachel's work and Laban's deception. Jacob was deeply in love with Rachel and desired to marry her. With his heart full of hope, he approached Laban, his uncle, and said, "Please allow me to marry Rachel, your youngest daughter. I'm willing to work for you for 7 years in exchange for her." Laban accepted, and Jacob began to work hard. He tended the flocks, helped with the daily chores, and demonstrated exemplary dedication. 7 years passed, as if they were only a few days, for his love for Rachel made each effort light and bearable. Finally, the wedding night arrived. Jacob was excited and happy, imagining that he would finally be with the woman he loved. But that night, Laban deceived him. When Jacob entered the tent to consummate the marriage, he realized too late. It was Leah, his eldest daughter, wearing the wedding veil. Jacob was surprised and indignant, but Laban explained, "Here in our country, the eldest daughter must marry first. Then you can marry Rachel if you work another 7 years." Jacob realized he had been deceived, but he also knew he needed to fulfill the traditions of the land. So he worked for 7 more years, this time with patience and renewed hope, to finally marry Rachel, the woman his heart desired. During this time, their family life began to expand. Leah gave birth to children. Rachel was still childless at that time, and Jacob learned perseverance, patience, and trust in God's plan. Each child brought with it promises and blessings, paving the way for the large family God had promised. This episode shows that, even with deception and challenges, God fulfills his promises in mysterious ways, and that faith, even when tested, is rewarded. Jacob learned to work, wait, and trust as his story continued to unfold in extraordinary ways. The formation of Jacob's family. As the years passed, Jacob began to build his large family. Leah, his first wife, gave birth to his sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Each birth was celebrated with joy, but it also reflected Jacob's complicated love for his wives. He deeply loved Rachel, his true love, but tradition and God's will were manifested through Leah. Rachel, initially childless, felt sadness and longing in her heart. To cope, she gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob so she could have children in her place. Thus, Dan and Naphtali were born. Leah, seeing she could still contribute more, also gave her servant Zilpah, and Gad and Asher were born. Finally, the Lord answered Rachel's heart, and she gave birth to Joseph, her beloved son. Later, Benjamin was born, completing the formation of the family that would become the foundation of the 12 tribes of Israel. This phase of Jacob's life was not just about birth and growth. It was about love, rivalry, challenges, and faith. Each son represented not only a promise fulfilled, but also the fulfillment of God's will, who had declared from Rebekah's womb that Jacob would continue a blessed lineage. Despite the tensions and difficulties within the family, jealousy, disputes, and preferences, God was with Jacob, guiding every step, showing that even complex situations can be part of a greater plan. The family grew, tribes formed, and Jacob, despite all his human imperfections, continued to be an instrument of divine promises. Jacob prospers as Laban's shepherd. After years of working for Laban, Jacob became an extremely skilled and dedicated shepherd. He carefully tended the flocks, separating the best animals, choosing healthy sheep, and ensuring that each pasture was safe and productive. The work was arduous, requiring long walks under the scorching sun and cold nights outdoors, but Jacob persevered with determination and faith. The Lord was with Jacob, blessing his every effort. His flocks began to multiply remarkably. Jacob, with cunning and discernment, used methods that respected Laban's breeding but allowed his own animals to thrive. He separated brindled and spotted animals, and, according to God's promise, more of these were born, significantly increasing his own flock. Over time, Jacob accumulated considerable wealth, numerous flocks, servants, and valuable possessions. Although he worked under Laban's authority, God's favor was clearly upon him, making Jacob prosperous even in the midst of hardship. This phase of Jacob's life shows that when someone trusts in God and works with dedication, even in the face of difficult circumstances or difficult people, divine blessings manifest. Jacob's prosperity was not merely material. It was a confirmation that God was with him, guiding his steps and ensuring that the promise made in Rebekah's womb was beginning to be visibly fulfilled. He also learned to balance human effort with faith, patience, and wisdom. Every challenge he faced, Laban's attempts to deceive him or hinder his progress, was an opportunity for Jacob to depend more on God, solidifying not only his wealth but also his character and trust in the Lord. The decision to leave Laban's house. As the years passed, Jacob became not only prosperous but also aware of the growing tensions with his uncle Laban. Despite all his hard work and ability to prosper, Laban constantly changed agreements, tried to deceive him, and manipulated situations to his advantage. Jacob, ever prudent, watched every move, but knew the time had come to act. God spoke to Jacob's heart, saying, "Return to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you." Trusting this divine guidance, Jacob began preparing his family and possessions for departure. He gathered Rachel, Leah, his children, servants, and flocks, and carefully organizing everything to make the journey possible and safe. Each step required planning, crossing deserts, rivers, and unknown regions, all with the fear of possible conflict and the hope of rediscovering his homeland. When Laban learned of Jacob's intention to leave, he was indignant. He complained, tried to negotiate, and even pursued Jacob. But the Lord warned him in a dream, telling him not to harm Jacob. This gave Jacob confidence that God was truly guiding his journey. Finally, Jacob left. With each step he left behind years of challenges, deception, and manipulation, but he carried with him the experience, faith, and prosperity God had given him. It was a decisive departure, not just physical, but spiritual. He was returning to the land of his fathers, where he would confront his past, reconcile with his brother Esau, and continue to fulfill God's promise of fathering a great nation. Jacob's departure symbolizes confidence and courage. Even in the face of uncertainty, he moved in obedience to God's voice, knowing that each step was being guided towards something far greater than he could have imagined. the encounter with angels in Mahanaim. As Jacob journeyed back to his ancestral land, his heart was filled with both anticipation and apprehension. He knew he would soon have to face his brother Esau, who still harbored resentment for the blessing Jacob had received. The fear and uncertainty were great, but God did not leave him alone. One night, while camping near a place called Mahanaim, Jacob had an extraordinary experience. He saw a vision of God's angels descending and ascending between heaven and earth. It was as if heaven were opening before him, showing that divine protection accompanied him every step of the way. Jacob realized that God was not only present, but also sending his messengers to ensure the safety of him and his family. That vision was a powerful reminder. He need not fear the reunion with Esau, nor the dangers of the journey, for God was with him. Feeling strengthened and encouraged, Jacob arose, renewed in faith and courage. The experience at Mahanaim had transformed his anxiety into confidence. He knew that the challenges ahead were not merely human obstacles, but part of a divine plan that would be fulfilled. The vision of the angels served as confirmation. Jacob's every step was guided, every decision made under God's protection. It was a moment of peace amidst the tension, a reminder that even in situations of extreme danger or uncertainty, God's presence is a shield and an unshakable strength. The imminent reunion with Esau. As Jacob and his family continued their journey, the weight of their reunion with Esau grew ever greater. He knew his brother was strong, full of resentment, and had not forgotten the revenge he had promised. Each step brought him closer to a potentially dangerous confrontation, and fear gripped his heart. Amidst this tension, Jacob did what he always did in moments of great challenge. He prayed. In the silence of the night, he raised his voice to God, remembering the promise made in his mother's womb, the blessing of Isaac, and the experiences he had lived. He asked for protection for himself and his entire family, asking the Lord to transform the situation and calm Esau's heart. But Jacob didn't stop at prayer. Prudently, he devised a plan to smooth the reunion. He organized gifts, flocks, goats, sheep, and camels, distributed in several batches, to send to his brother as a token of repentance and respect. Each gift was carefully selected, a way of saying, "I come not to quarrel, but to reconcile." He also divided the family into groups, preparing for the worst, should Esau react violently. This strategy reflected his cunning and his faith. He trusted God, but also acted wisely. In the days leading up to the encounter, Jacob could barely sleep. He thought about every possible scenario. What if Esau attacked? What if his sons were in danger? But at the same time, he felt deep in his heart that God was with him, guiding every step. This period of anxiety and planning revealed a different Jacob. Not just the cunning man who had deceived Esau, but also the man who trusted God, who recognized his sovereignty, and who sought to act with prudence and faith at the same time. Jacob's wrestling with the angel at the ford of Jabbok. That night, Jacob separated from his family and walked alone to the ford of the Jabbok River. Darkness enveloped the place, and the silence of the night was heavy, only the sound of rushing water breaking the stillness. The fear of meeting Esau still pulsed in his heart, but he sensed something more, something divine about to happen. Suddenly, a man appeared, and Jacob realized this was no ordinary being. An intense struggle began. It was a physical battle, but also a spiritual one, a clash of strength, will, and faith. Jacob fought with all his might, grabbing, pushing, refusing to let go of his adversary. The man, who was an angel of the Lord, was incredibly strong, and the struggle lasted all night. Jacob didn't give up. Even wounded, tired, and on the verge of exhaustion, he held on tight, knowing there was something greater than himself. He pleaded, "Don't let me go unless you bless me." At dawn, the angel touched Jacob's thigh, and he limped for the rest of his life. But in that touch, Jacob received a blessing that would transform his life forever. God gave him a new name, Israel, which means one who fights with God and prevails. This struggle wasn't just physical. It represented Jacob's entire journey: cunning, perseverance, faith, fear, and courage. From that moment on, Jacob was no longer the same man who had been born clutching his brother's heel. He had faced God, resisted, trusted, and been transformed. Jacob looked up to heaven, feeling God's presence intensely and personally. He knew he was ready to meet Esau again, no longer as the cunning boy or the fugitive, but as a man, blessed and marked by the Lord, bearing a new identity and mission. Reconciliation with Esau, a transformative encounter. Jacob's reunion with Esau was one of the most tense and emotionally charged moments of his life. After years of separation, ever since Jacob fled in fear of his brother's wrath, he was finally returning to the land of Canaan, but anxiety consumed him. Every step toward Esau weighed heavily on his heart. The fear of revenge, the past marked by deceit, and the memory of the stolen blessing made the moment almost unbearable. Jacob, now Israel, gathered courage. He knew he couldn't face his brother as an adversary. He needed wisdom, humility, and strategy. So he divided his family into groups, organized the flocks, and prepared gifts, sheep, goats, camels, and servants, for Esau, not only as a gesture of peacemaking, but as a sign of respect and recognition of what had happened. Each gift was carefully selected, representing his sincerity and desire for reconciliation. Seeing Esau in the distance, Jacob felt his heart race. Memories of childhood, of flight, and of the stolen blessing came to mind. He prostrated himself 7 times before his brother, each fall symbolizing not only submission, but also repentance, acknowledgement of the offense, and humility before God and Esau. The distance between them seemed endless, but Jacob moved forward, step by step, carrying not only his possessions, but also the hope of healing and reconciliation. Esau, on the other hand, approached with a mixture of surprise and emotion. He expected resentment, perhaps even aggression, but what he found was a brother who appeared vulnerable, humble, and repentant. As he approached, Esau ran to meet Jacob. The encounter was intense. Both wept, tears falling on faces marked by time, suffering, and forgiveness. Each embrace they gave was not just physical. It was an embrace that healed decades of hurt, fear, and resentment. Jacob, who had wrestled with God at the ford of the Jabbok, now experienced human peace reflecting divine blessing. The reconciliation was not only between brothers, but also symbolic of the fact that God's ways, even the most difficult, those filled with trials, escapes, and struggles, always lead to restoration and peace. Furthermore, the encounter demonstrated how faith and perseverance transform hearts. Jacob not only managed to reconcile with Esau, but his entire family was safe. God had guided every step of the journey, the escape, the dreams, the struggles, the prosperity, the conflicts with Laban, and finally the reunion and peace. Every detail of Jacob's life had been used to fulfill God's promise and prepare the great nation that would arise from his descendants. Esau's forgiveness and the embrace between the brothers symbolized the victory of humility and faith over fear and revenge. Jacob, now Israel, walked before God with confidence, knowing that his story was not just personal, but part of an eternal plan, full of purpose, blessing, and redemption. This final moment is not just about Jacob and Esau, but about God's work in the lives of those who trust him. Profound transformations, restoration of relationships, and fulfillment of God's promises, even after years of hardship and suffering. Jacob's life is much more than a series of historical events or biblical narratives. It is a true learning manual on faith, perseverance, and personal transformation. Throughout his journey, Jacob faced fears, challenges, family conflicts, mistakes, and trials. And each of these moments brings valuable lessons that apply to this day. First, we learn about trust in God even in the midst of fear. From birth, When he wrestled with his brother in Rebekah's womb, Jacob faced seemingly insurmountable adversities. Later, when fleeing from Esau, he could have succumbed to anxiety and despair, but he trusted in God's promise, demonstrating that faith is the foundation in times of insecurity. Secondly, we see the importance of perseverance and patience. Jacob worked long years to marry Rachel, and even though he was deceived by Laban, he didn't give up. He persevered, trusting that time and effort, combined with divine protection, would bring the right reward. This teaches us that obstacles are often part of the process of growth and maturity. Another crucial point is the transformation through confrontation with God and oneself. The struggle at the ford of the Jabbok symbolizes the moment when Jacob faced his own fears, mistakes, and limitations. Limping away, but with a new name, Israel, he shows that true strength lies not in avoiding challenges, but in facing them with faith, courage, and humility. Furthermore, their conciliation with Esau teaches us about forgiveness and relationship restoration. Jacob not only survived conflict, but learned to act with prudence, wisdom, and humility, achieving peace. This shows that faith and conscious action go hand in hand, and that God can transform even the most difficult relationships. Finally, the story of Jacob reminds us that our life is shaped by both challenges and blessings, and that every experience, good or bad, can be used by God to shape and prepare us to fulfill our purpose. Jacob's journey is a call to reflect on our own struggles, learn from our mistakes, trust in God's promises, and seek to transform our fears into faith and our courage into action. Jacob leaves us an eternal legacy, the faith that persists, the patience that waits, and the transformation that comes through contact with God. He is an example that, even in the face of the most complex difficulties and the most frightening threats, it is possible to grow, be blessed, and leave a lasting impact on history. Jacob's story doesn't end with his reconciliation with Esau or the peace he found in his family. It extends far beyond his life through his sons, who became the foundations of 12 tribes of Israel. Each tribe grew out of a part of Jacob's story, his struggles, his hopes, his mistakes, and his blessings, and carried with it God's promise to the patriarch. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin were not just sons. They were the seeds of a nation destined to fulfill divine purposes. Each of them inherited Jacob's character traits, cunning, perseverance, faith, and also the lessons learned from his life of trials and overcoming. Jacob's legacy shows that our actions, decisions, and faith impact not only our own lives, but also future generations. Jacob's struggle, his patience, his mistakes and successes shaped the history of an entire nation. His descendants became leaders, warriors, prophets, and ultimately the chosen people to manifest God's plan on earth. Furthermore, Jacob's example teaches us that from every challenge can come growth and greatness. His personal struggles, his escape, his perseverance amid deception, and his ultimate reconciliation were not just for him. They served to form a lineage that would play a crucial role in the history of the world. Jacob leaves us a powerful message. Our mistakes do not define us, our struggles can transform us, and our choices can create legacies that last for generations. Jacob's story is therefore not only a tale of faith and courage, but also a lesson in how an individual's life can influence and shape an entire nation. Jacob's life is a story of struggle, faith, and transformation. From his mother's womb, where he already fought with his brother, to the moment he became Israel, the man who struggled with God and prevailed. His journey is marked by challenges that tested his character, his courage, and his trust in God. Jacob shows us that no matter how turbulent the journey is, with fear, deception, rivalries, or unexpected obstacles, those who trust in God can transform every difficulty into a blessing. Every step, every struggle, every prayer, every tear carried a divine purpose that would be fully revealed over time. By reconciling with Esau, Jacob not only sealed peace between brothers, but symbolized that forgiveness, humility, and faith are more powerful than any resentment or revenge. By receiving the name Israel, he demonstrated that true strength does not come merely from the body or cunning, but from the courage to face God, oneself, and one's own limitations. And finally, through his sons, Jacob left a legacy that would change the history of an entire nation. Each tribe carried with them the perseverance, faith, and promise he received, reminding us that our actions and choices have an impact that goes far beyond our own lives. Jacob's story is, above all, an eternal lesson. The faith that persists, the courage that faces the unknown, the wisdom that acts with patience and humility, and the transformation that only God can bring about. He shows us that even the most ordinary man can become an instrument of great promise, and that every struggle, every challenge, and every blessing are pieces of a divine plan much greater than we can imagine. May Jacob's story inspire us all to fight with courage, trust in God in all circumstances, and seek to live a life marked by faith, perseverance, and eternal legacy.